In the old port city of Galle, where the sea whispers tales to the ancient Dutch fort, a tall, white lighthouse stood guard. It was a sentinel, a watchful eye over the Indian Ocean. Its light was a promise of safety for sailors far from home. This was Sri Lanka in the year 1884, a time of tall ships and long voyages. The lighthouse at Galle was more than just a building. It was a beacon of hope. For the sailors navigating the treacherous waters, its beam cutting through the darkness was the difference between a safe return and a watery grave. Every night its light swept across the waves, a steady, reassuring presence against the vast, unpredictable sea. On one particular night, the whispers of the sea turned into a furious roar. A cyclone, a monster made of wind and water, descended upon the coast. Rain fell not in drops but in solid sheets, lashing against the stone walls of the fort and the sturdy base of the lighthouse. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, tearing at the palm trees and whipping the ocean into a frenzy of towering waves. It was a night when sensible people stayed indoors, huddled together, listening to the storm's terrible symphony. It was a night when the sea showed its true, untamable power. Inside the lighthouse lived a man named Samuel Perera. He was not young or strong, but old and weathered, like the fort itself. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of the sun and the sea. For years, Samuel had been the keeper of the light. It was his duty, his life's work. He knew the lighthouse as he knew his own hands. He understood its every groan and creak, especially on a night like this. While others sought shelter, Samuel stood at his post, his heart steady, his mind focused only on the great lamp at the very top of the tower. Samuel was a quiet man, one who spoke little but felt deeply. His connection to the lighthouse was profound. He polished the great lens until it shone like a diamond and trimmed the wick of the oil lamp with meticulous care. He knew that out on that raging sea, sailors were trusting him. They were trusting the light he tended. His responsibility was a heavy one, but he carried it with a quiet pride. He was not just a keeper of a lamp, he was a keeper of lives, a guardian for all those who sailed under the dark, angry sky. Suddenly a gust of wind, stronger and more violent than any before, slammed into the lighthouse tower. The old structure shuddered from its foundations to its very peak. High up in the lantern room, the impossible happened. The storm found a way inside, a tiny crack to exploit, and with a ferocious puff it blew out the great flame. The light was gone. One moment a powerful beam sliced through the tempest. The next there was only blackness. The heart of the lighthouse had stopped beating, and the promise of safety it offered was broken. Down below, Samuel felt the change instantly. It was a deep, gut-wrenching feeling. The familiar rhythmic sweep of light across his small room vanished. Darkness flooded in, a profound and terrifying emptiness that mirrored the chaos outside. He knew what it meant. The ships out there, battling the monstrous waves and screaming wind, were now blind. They were sailing towards the deadly rocks near the shore, with no guide to warn them away. He could almost hear their desperate cries, lost in the roar of the cyclone. Fear gripped him, but it was not for himself. The danger was immediate and immense. Without the beacon, the ships would be drawn towards the coast, believing they were heading for the safety of the harbor. Instead, they would be sailing straight into a trap, their wooden hulls no match for the jagged rocks hidden beneath the churning water. Lives would be lost, families would be shattered, all because one small flame had been extinguished by the storm's mighty breath. Samuel knew he was the only one who could prevent this catastrophe. The fate of those sailors rested entirely on his frail shoulders. He did not hesitate. There was no time for thought, no room for fear to take root. His duty called to him, a voice louder than the howling wind. He had to get to the top. He had to face the storm head-on and relight the lamp. It was a task that seemed impossible for any man, let alone one of his age. But Samuel Perera was more than just any man. He was a lighthouse keeper. He grabbed his coat and a box of matches, his hands trembling not from fear, but from a fierce, unshakable resolve. The climb up the winding staircase was a battle in itself. The tower, which had always felt so solid and safe, now seemed to sway with every blast of wind. It groaned and protested as if it might be torn apart at any moment. Samuel held on tight to the cold metal handrail, pulling himself up one step at a time. Rainwater seeped through the stone walls, making the steps slick and treacherous. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the terrifying flashes of lightning that lit up the spiraling stairs for a split second, revealing the long, dizzying climb ahead of him. When he finally reached the top and pushed open the door to the lantern room, the full force of the cyclone hit him. The wind screamed in his ears and tried to tear him from his feet. It felt like a physical blow, a solid wall of air pushing him back. Shattered glass from a broken pane littered the floor, and rain lashed into the small space, drenching him to the bone. The great lamp stood cold and dark in the center of the room. His first attempt to strike a match failed. The tiny flame was instantly snatched away by the wind. Samuel knew he needed to shield the flame. Using his own body as a barrier, he crouched over the lamp, turning his back to the broken window. His old coat, soaked and heavy, offered little protection. He tried again. He struck another match, cupping it carefully in his trembling hands. For a moment, a small, brave light flickered into existence. The wind howled, trying to extinguish it, but Samuel held firm. He brought the tiny flame to the wick of the great lamp, praying it would catch. The wick was damp, but it finally sputtered to life. Just as the main flame began to grow, a powerful gust of wind blew a shard of glass into his arm, and a stray spark from the lamp singed his coat. He felt the sharp sting of the cut and the heat of the fire, but he did not move. He could not move. He had to protect the flame. He stayed crouched over it, using his body as a shield, until the light grew strong and steady, powerful enough to defy the storm. Only then did he allow himself to stand, his arm bleeding and his body aching, to see the beacon shine once more. The light cut through the storm. Its beams, strong and unwavering, once again swept across the violent sea. For the sailors on 4 different ships, lost and disoriented in the cyclone, it was a miracle. It was the guiding star they had prayed for. Following its path, they navigated away from the deadly rocks and towards the relative safety of the open ocean, where they could ride out the rest of the storm. Hundreds of lives were saved that night. Husbands, fathers and sons would see their homes again, all because one old man refused to let the darkness win. When the storm finally passed and the sun rose on a battered but peaceful Galle, Samuel made his way down from the tower. He was exhausted, injured, and his clothes were burnt and torn. He quietly tended to his wounds and repaired the broken window, seeking no praise or reward. In the official reports, the storm was documented and the survival of the ships was noted, but the name of Samuel Perera was never mentioned. His incredible act of bravery went unrecorded. He lived out the rest of his days in quiet obscurity, his story known only to a few local people. History books are filled with the names of kings, generals and explorers, but history is also made by ordinary people who show extraordinary courage in moments of crisis. Samuel Perera was one of these people. He was an unsung hero, a man whose sacrifice was never celebrated with medals or monuments. His reward was not fame or fortune, but the quiet knowledge that he had done his duty. He had kept his promise to the sailors who depended on him, and his light had guided them home through the darkest of nights. And so his story lives on, not in dusty archives, but in the tales passed down from one generation to the next in the city of Galle. It is a reminder that true heroism is not always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it is as quiet as an old man climbing a dark tower in a storm. It is found in the simple, selfless acts of people who, without a thought for themselves, shine a light for others in a world that can often seem very dark. We must remember heroes like Samuel, for their bravery is a beacon for all of us.